Okay, it looks like we have everyone here who we need. There's a lot of you. So, so welcome. We are just so excited that we're finally here and that the decisions are made, and we have gotten through the phase one of at least identifying who in Southeast Tennessee can use these funds. So I am Abby Garrison. I am Vice President of Venture Forward here at United Way. And our role in this whole thing has mostly been around the outreach to you guys, because Venture Forward is a membership organization that supports capacity building of nonprofits in our region. So that's why we play the outreach role. We have the list, right, of nonprofits and leaders in nonprofits, and really tried to spread the word to all of y'all to apply for this funding. In particular, we also were really involved in an impact study around the impacts of COVID on the nonprofit sector. That was through the form of a survey that the Chattanooga Nonprofit Coalition sent out back in April and May. And what came from that was not surprising, but was just, one of the big findings was the really precarious situation that many nonprofits found themselves in responding and reacting to COVID. So when this funding opportunity came about, we at Venture Forward, and certainly at United Way, were just thrilled to try to figure out how to get some of this funding to Southeast Tennessee. So we know it's important, and are excited to see how we get this out here locally. Do we want to introduce the whole team right now, Heather, or did you want to wait on that?
Yeah, I'm going to do that in a second. I just wanted Leslie to kind of give her 2 cents real quick, and then we'll do that.
Perfect. I wasn't sure if that was on the front end or the later end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Scarce. She's our CEO here at United Way, and get her thoughts on this. So Leslie, good morning.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sometimes when you call in on Zoom, it can be a little sketchy. Good morning. As Abby said, I'm Leslie Scarce. I know many of you just from your incredible work across our community and across the region. And I just wanted to kick us off today by, one, sharing how very excited we are about this opportunity for our communities. We knew at United Way when the CARES Act funding was announced by Governor Lee, we just knew that it was going to be critical for us to step up and step in to take this on, so that we could work with all of you to ensure that these dollars came to our community and that they were put to great use, and that ultimately they're helping your organization, but helping you help people, and ensuring that those who are most impacted by COVID-19, that their lives will be better and come out the other side of this more resilient and more thriving. So for us at United Way, our mission is really simple. We unite people and resources in building stronger, healthier communities. And so I can't think of a better way to do that than working with all of you to unite the resources that you need in order to lead well and serve well during the season. So with that, please know that we are excited that over $24 million has been allotted for our region and for this group of organizations, and to be spent by November 15th. It's going to be a big task. One thing that we know for certain is that federal funding and partnering with the Department of Human Services is very compliance heavy. There are a lot of details and I wouldn't say hoops to jump through. I would say just details and things that are critical in doing this process well. And so it's going to require a lot of effort on your part. It's going to require partnership with your board, with those who work with your organization around finance and accounting and legal. And it's going to ultimately be a team effort, but one that we know and we believe will pay off dividends for years and years to come. So we are here to partner with you. Our role in this is to help be a guide. We are here to help streamline communications between you and the state. We are here to do everything we can to get questions answered, But at the end of the day, this has got to be a partnership between our organizations in order to reach the goals of this project. So I thank you for that. I thank you for your willing attitude and your willingness to continue to serve. And just thank you for this process that we're going to undertake together in the months to come. So with that, I just simply, I'm out of town this morning, but I wanted to pop on simply to say thank you and to know how absolutely thrilled we are at United Way to be on this journey with you.
Thank you,
Heather?
Leslie. Yeah, thanks for hopping on. We appreciate you doing it while you're out of town.
Of course, no problem.
Okay, so I'm Heather Degatano, and I was asked by United Way to come in and be the fund manager for these $24 million coming from the state to our region. And I also am managing director and general counsel at Reflection Writing and have worked with many of you over the years. So thank you to all of you for being a part of this. I know it's a big task. So I am supposed to remind you, the lawyer is supposed to remind you that we are recording this and to let you know that, but also so that we can get it out to folks who weren't able to join us this morning. That is in fact the case. We are recording this. So, all right, I made several notes of things I wanted to share with you guys. I want to introduce the team of people you'll be working with, and then we want to pass some information that we've received in the last few days from the state as well. So you have it. And then we want to take your questions and hear some of your concerns. We've heard lots of them through email thus far, but we are tracking them. We're doing daily batches to the state so they get the questions that are coming from you as well. So first, I'm Heather, like I said, and I'm the fund manager. I'm also an attorney and have been working in sort of governance and compliance for many years with nonprofits locally. Then I want to introduce our two financial analysts. Janet, can you wave or there's Janet. I hope y'all can see her. It's so hard to not know people's faces, but Janet,
say something so we can see you. So you pop up.
You're muted, Janet.
Now I'm not muted. Good morning, everybody.
Thanks, Janet. And then John is also our second financial analyst.
Hello, everybody.
John Ship. And then Jesse Peterson. There's Jesse. Jesse, say something.
Hello.
There's Jesse. So she's the one who's been answering most of your emails and reaching out to you by phone over the last week or so to answer questions and get things to the state. And then Susie Anthony, who probably many of you know as well, who's the CFO at United Way.
Good morning. Hi, everyone.
Susie is, I'm calling her the head honcho. She is in charge, I guess, from the United Way staff side of this group of people who will be leading the process. So that's the team that's going to be working with you, taking your calls, providing information as we get it, and offering some tools and options to help, we hope, make this process a little more streamlined and efficient. Okay, so my notes, I had many notes I wanted to share with you. First is, this is an evolving process. So I walked in the door last week, and I mean the virtual door last week, and things are changing quickly. As we ask questions of the state and as we provide questions you're asking to them, they're making decisions, working with their compliance partner to figure out the answers to those questions. Those things have changed to some extent in the last week, just since I walked in the door. So please know that this process is evolving, it's changing. Some answers will change, some guidance will change over time. And we're all just gonna sort of have to make peace with that and work around it. We request that you guys run everything through Jesse, who's answering, who'll be responsive to the TN Cares at uwchat.org email. I've been crazy impressed with how quickly Jesse's able to work through these emails and get responses out. Now the response may be, we don't know the answer. we're going to work with the state to get the answer. But Jessie has got her eyes on that email all day long and is streamlining and making lists of questions, pushing things to the top when those questions have come from more than one recipient, that kind of thing. So please send, I know we know lots of you, like Abby has worked with lots of you, Susie has worked with lots of you, putting everything into that email. So we have a paper trail and we have one streamlined location for all communications. Is going to help us comply with the state's requirements and help us get your questions and concerns to the right people quickly. So thank you for sending everything through that email. I also wanted to kind of talk about our job as this team of folks administering these funds. Nearly 90 agencies in our region, and I think the region, Susie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a 16 county region total. Was it 16 or is it 11? It was 11. 11, yeah. So an 11 county area received funding. That's a lot. That's a lot of agencies in a lot of areas. Some of them are central, some of them are in eastern. They do all kinds of different work supporting people in this region. So it's a huge number. And because there are so many state and federal requirements here, this is just going to be kind of a long slog. It's going to take longer than we would like to get answers to your questions. It's going to take a little longer than we would like to maybe get back to everybody. But know that our job is to provide support and advice to you guys so that we can get your requests for funding in and get them approved so you can get funding in your hands as quickly as possible. I think we all have the same goal there. What else? So a couple of notes on questions we've received that I just want to reiterate, though I think most of you know these things. One is that the state has decided that these funds are going to be distributed on a reimbursement basis only, not as an advance. That was in the guidelines, I think, since the beginning, though there was talk of doing it differently at the beginning. So this is something all of you need to know, and I just wanted to say it out loud again because we have had questions on it. So Susie, I wanted you to talk a little bit kind of like about how federal funding works and a little bit about the risks associated with it, because we have had some questions about people from agencies where they're worried about spending funds, they're worried about kind of jumping into this process. And I think you probably are the right person to speak to that more closely.
So those of you who have not accepted and processed through federal funds before, it is very complicated and there is a significant amount of risk that comes with it. That if you don't follow the exact compliance requirements and all of the terms and conditions to a T, you do run a risk of spending those monies and not being reimbursed for them, or even being reimbursed for them. And then when the feds come and do their audit of these funds later on, ending back with a clawback where they come to you and they say they've audited your reimbursement and they want you to pay back to them funds that you've been reimbursed. That's a worst case scenario, but it's something that everyone needs to be really, really aware of and prepared for, that you really have to read through all of these terms and conditions and be so diligent about compliance. One other thing, and I think Heather's going to get into this, but if I can just throw this out there to get things going a little bit, is that if the fact that your application has been approved does not necessarily mean that everything in your budget or everything about your application is necessarily eligible for this federal funding, right? There are details in there that you need to work through that, you know, like, can you prove that this expense was indeed COVID related, right? If you were offering support to someone in the past and you just want to increase that support to them during this time, those individuals, you're going to have support for each one of those individuals that they have been impacted by COVID, that their employment or their health status or something has been impacted by COVID and such forth. So Heather's going to get more into those details, I think, but it really, really, really is important that you guys understand the full weight of the compliance requirements of federal dollars, and that you take responsibility for that.
So thank you, Susie. Yeah, I've managed several federal grants over the years. some big, some small. And every time those dollars have come through the door, I've sat with my leadership team and said, do we want to take them? Like, here's what we have to do. And every time I go in with the terms and conditions and the compliance requirements, the leadership team at the various organizations I've worked with over the years are like, wait a minute. And then we have a conversation about whether it's worth it to take those dollars, whether we can do the kind of compliance that entity of the federal government's asking for. So I would encourage all of you to go back to your leadership teams and involve the people with financial and legal experience on your board as well, and maybe even your outside consultants who help you with that, and just go through the guidelines together and make sure that your team is ready to do this. I have full confidence that you guys can do this. I mean, if I can do it, you can do it, right? It's not rocket science, but it is exceptionally complicated and exceptionally detailed. So have those conversations around your tables so we can all be ready for it. Several of you have also asked about the process for how you'll submit to get funding back from this process. And I did like a 4-step quick rundown. If you haven't yet seen, okay, y'all bear with me. I have never shared my screen before. I've always forced everybody else to do it for me. But today, it's everybody's lucky day. I'm going to share a screen with you. Okay, somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Good, okay, thank you. So this is, wait a minute, that's not the one I want that one. Okay, this is kind of the landing page at DHS for the Community Cares Program. Many of you have seen this because the application stuff was here. So if you scroll down, you'll see all the stuff about frequently asked questions and a packet of information. If you click here on frequently asked questions, you'll get a set of questions that mostly revolved around the application process, but it also has some information about compliance as well. The state has told us this will be updated in the next few days, but if you have not read these frequently asked questions, I would really recommend that you do it. And if you come down, scroll down a little bit over here, you'll see the section for nonprofits. There's a whole bunch of information here as well that can help you wade through this. One thing that's useful is this webinars section here. If you have not been on those calls with the state, this is where they're posting webinars. So when they record them, if you haven't been able to get your schedule to work to see them live, this is where they're putting them. There have been a couple since this last posting, and they've told us also that those will go up next week. As we get links to those, we will send those out as well. As we get links to more recent frequently asked questions, which they have also said they're in the process of updating, we'll send those out to you guys as well. But they're also here if you want to just keep tabs on them as you go. So those are some resources. They're not entirely simple to find. But if you Google Tennessee Community Cares Program and DHS, you'll get to this website, and we'll also I think Jesse's going to drop some of those things in the chat so you have it. Okay, let me unshare my screen. Stop share. There we go. Look at that. Okay, the quick process for submitting RFFs. Here's my 4-point plan of how this is going to work, and our team has been putting it together since we walked in the door. So, again, the terms and the conditions are your first stop, making sure you want to do this, making sure you're ready to do it, and using your best judgment to prepare a request for funding, which the state calls an RFF. You'll submit it through their online system, which is called CAMS. And excuse me, there are 2 really important sections in the terms and conditions. I'll be frank with you, all 91 pages are important, and I have read 87 of those 91 pages. I'm bearing down on the end of it. They're all important. And I really can't reiterate enough that some of the important things are buried in what you and I think of as boilerplate. So really read through them. But when you're ready, there's a list there of eligible and ineligible expenses, about 5 pages total, 3 pages of eligible, 2 pages of ineligible with examples. Those are key points as you put together a request for funding to submit it to get dollars into your hands. So step 1 is you're going to prepare an RFF with the supporting documentation you need and submit it into CAMS online, doing your best to comply with the terms and conditions. Our coordinator, Jesse, will receive that through that online system and double check that everything that's supposed to be there is in fact there. Attachments, tax ID numbers, all the stuff that is supposed to be there is attached. She will either send it back to you and say something is missing, or she will send it on to John and Janet, who are the financial analysts, and they will review it from a financial perspective, from a compliance perspective. They will review it and test it. And then if they have concerns that something may not be eligible or approved, they're going to send it back to Jesse, to send it back to you to try again. The goal is that we don't want to submit things here that are unlikely to be funded and accepted. So, and then it will go back through that process again. When John and Janet are finished with it and they feel good about it, they feel confident about it, they'll send it to me to approve. If I need support or help, I'll talk to Susie, and then we'll hit submit and it'll go to the state. John and Janet have been working on a process to make this a little easier for you guys. John, do you want to speak to the templates you've put together and how they, how our folks might be able to use them to make the process a little simpler?
Sure. So when you submit a request for reimbursement, let me start my video here. When you submit a request for the reimbursement, there's kind of like 4 basic types of expenses that you're going to be reimbursed, and each one is a little different as far as what kind of documentation support that you have to have in order to get reimbursed. So to make sure that we're being streamlined and are getting everything that we need on the front end, and we don't have to have a lot of back and forth each time you submit a request, we created a template of kind of the things that you're going to need to answer and the documents that you need to include whenever you submit these requests. So the 4 different kind of like high level reimbursement types is going to be a reimbursement for materials. So that's something, if you're purchasing like protective equipment or hand sanitizer, mask, something like that, that's going to be called like a materials reimbursement. And so basically you're going to want to provide the invoice and other various documentation. We'll dig into that a little deeper, but there's also going to be payroll reimbursements, and then equipment use or mileage reimbursement. So if you're, have some kind of travel expense related to COVID and you're reimbursing somebody for mileage, and then contracts. So for instance, if you're renting something for, to set up like a COVID shelter or something like that. So if you've got like a long-term contract where you're paying a monthly fee, there's going to be like a contract reimbursement test. So I'll go ahead and share my screen to just kind of show one of these as an example. And so this is going to be for the materials reimbursement. And so basically at the very top here, I've kind of laid out some instructions to follow as far as just how to use the template. The state has provided us the documentation that's needed, so you can see here that information. And so basically you have all these questions that need to be supported by your documentation. So one of the things they request is that you provide a narrative of why is this COVID related. For invoices, they want you to provide the invoice, but we need to be able to see the invoice date, the invoice number, the vendor, various information that's required. If it was something that was shipped to you, they're requiring that you submit some kind of support to show that you received it. That's going to be a little onerous. So one of the things we're suggesting is, if you bought something from Amazon, if you can just go and click on like the tracking information and show where the delivery was confirmed, and maybe just print that off or take a screenshot of it. And also you'll have to have payment information. So, that could be showing like the copy of the check that was paid. If it's an ACH or a credit card, you could show you could upload like the credit card statement or the bank statement and just kind of highlight what the line item of or that payment was. And so it says this in the instructions, but one of the things that we're requesting is everything that's shaded green, it needs an input, it needs a response. So this column is just answering the various questions that we have to be able to answer in order to get you reimbursed. This column is just saying like, if you uploaded a document to provide this information, just indicate to us what document it is, because one of the things that we could see potentially happening is if you guys upload, a handful of documents, and maybe some of those documents are, 20, 30 pages long, and really all we need is just a transaction or a number or something off that document. If you can just reference in the document, or if you can just reference what document here supports answering these questions, that'll be helpful, save us a lot of time, and all of this is just trying to get you guys reimbursed as quickly as possible. I mean, we're working with, so many different nonprofits here. We're going to have so many requests, and so really just want to streamline everything, try to avoid the going back and forth, having to email you guys individually and ask you questions. I know that during the application process that happened a lot, and I think it was just kind of the instructions weren't real clear for you guys what you needed to upload. So hopefully we're kind of heading that off the pass here and being very clear with what you guys need every time you reimburse and or submit a reimbursement request, and just make sure that you have kind of this checklist of everything that you need. And then when you submit that reimbursement request and you upload the documents to support it, just make a copy of this template, fill it out, and upload it with the request. And that way, as we're reviewing your request, we're sitting here and we're pulling all this information out of here, looking at your documents, verifying everything. And I don't think it's going to be really easy, but hopefully this simplifies it and makes things a little more streamlined for everyone. And we tested this out with one of the recipients already, just to let them review it and see what kind of questions they might have. So, but that's all I have in regards to these templates. We'll send them out to everyone so that you can start using them when you start submitting those requests.
Thank you, John. You want to unshare so I can see everybody again? Thank you. Okay, so I hope that document, so I'm not an accountant, and I walked through it as an example, and I feel like it really is helpful to know exactly what they're requiring. And so, if the state's going to require those things, having a quick list to look at, I think is great. So thank you guys, Janet and John, for putting those together for each of the testing pieces that they're going to require. Okay, then a few more little notes, and then I want to ask for questions, and we're getting some questions in the chat too. So Jesse's looking at those. Again, I want to reiterate that you cannot assume that everything in your budget is eligible to receive funding just because your application was approved. We're going to need you guys to go through those terms and conditions and double check your budgets and make sure that that's true. Those terms and conditions were not available during the application process. So this is the time to do that. Additionally, the state yesterday let us know that they're going to provide updated terms and conditions. We're not sure when that will be. As soon as we get them, we will send them to you. We're not sure what changes will be made or whether they'll just be providing more information. Like I said, as soon as we get them, we'll get them out to you guys. So while I hate email as much as everyone else does, please keep your eyes on your email, the primary and the secondary contacts that were on the application. And if that has changed, you've got to let us know that as soon as you can. But that's where those updates will be coming. The other thing is that some applications, but not all by any means, included the 10% administrative allowance. So through the initial guidelines, we were able to apply for 10% of the total of the application as administrative, kind of what we would call overhead. If you didn't do that, we think it's okay for you to revise your budget and include that, so that if things come up that you need, for example, if you need to buy something to help you comply with this process, because these weren't things you anticipated because we didn't have the terms and conditions on the front end, then we think it probably needs to come out of that 10% administrative administrative allowance. So that's an option for some of you who are going to have unforeseen expenses as well. So the key point really is that everything that's happening here has to be COVID related, and every expense that comes in to be reimbursed, you're going to have to provide a narrative of how it's COVID related. So that's one of the things John pointed out in his template. So that's probably language that you want to go ahead and work out with your teams and have ready to go, ready to submit. So next steps. You guys have probably now 2 to maybe 3 times received the set of documents that from the state that has next steps and then instructions for how to do a lot of those things. Many of you have like signed up for supplier IDs and gotten registered on SAMS.gov this week. We appreciate all that. If you haven't done those things yet, they have to go to the top of your list because we can't. The state has said they're not able to turn on the CAM system for these reimbursements until everybody has a supplier ID. Like whether that at the end of the day is what actually happens or not, we don't know. But note that has to go to the top of your list. We have heard your frustrations loud and clear on getting those supplier IDs and the SAM.gov stuff organized. We realize it's not always simple. We are going to send out today some more instructions that the state gave us last night on how to do this if you're having problems and where to send what particular things so that you can get help. They're now asking for screenshots because some of the problems were unanticipated. So we're going to send that out to you by email after this session, and we're also going to include the templates that John's talked about and a few other things. What else? As you get those supplier ID numbers, or as you find your tax ID numbers, some applications came through without them, that kind of thing. Send those to Jesse by the tncares at uwchat.org email. We're uploading those every night for the state so they can match them in complicated ways that just needs to be done in order to be able to reimburse you. So as you get those numbers, send them to us. We'll upload them so the state has them and move the process forward. Okay, I can't emphasize this enough. And then I'm going to stop emphasizing it, I promise. The terms and conditions, there are 91 pages. I promise you got to read them all. They tell you all kinds of important things and they answer lots of the questions you guys have been sending to us. So I had a couple of examples, things that are buried in the boilerplate that you may not have noticed, right? So there may be a requirement that if you're going to use a contractor, you have to use someone who has a Tennessee state license rather than someone who doesn't. You may have to post signage saying you received state and federal funding. You may need to keep records for at least 5 years, maybe 7 years, maybe longer, depending on which one of those things you fall into. If you want to buy equipment that's valued at more than $5,000, Section 20 of the terms and conditions tells you how to do that and tells you what the process is to use. That is probably 40 or 50 pages down. So while I understand that it's onerous, it's a lot to do, you guys have just got to go through them and make sure you're comfortable with them and make sure you find the ones that apply to you, and work with your accountant, your attorney, your board, your leadership team to make sure you're comfortable with them and you can comply. Okay, I think that's most of the stuff I have. Yes, okay, so how do we want to do Q&A? Do we want to just take the questions as they're coming in the chat? Do we want people to just chime in and ask questions out loud? Abby, do you have a sense for what's the easiest thing to do from your many, many, many Zoom calls?
Yeah, I think with this many people, if you guys could type them in the chat, it'd be best. There's been a lot of stuff that has been answered in the chat. If any of that is, if you use your editorial lens, if any of that is worth repeating aloud, because again, that's the chat. Was the chat captured in a recording or is it just the video?
I don't know the answer to that question, but Jesse's going to make a list. So
yeah, but I think it's best for you guys to answer things in the chat. So where are we? Susie, you've been Susie and Jesse, y'all been answering a lot in the chat. Are we at Becky's question now?
I think so. And if some have been skipped, maybe like resubmit them or just unmute and chime in, whatever is easiest. So let's see.
So let's start. Heather, or whoever from our team needs to answer this. The state emphasizes the use of these funds to stop the spread of COVID-19, but not that the client's situation was a direct result of COVID-19. Which is correct?
The second statement, right? So it can also be related to loss of employment due to quarantine closures and such forth. Yeah. And they are continuing to update those terms and conditions to change and or clarify a lot of things like that. Hopefully they're going to release those very soon.
I think that's part of what you have to explain in the narrative too, right?
Right.
Okay, so what is the deadline for us to submit our revised budgets?
So we have gone, for those of you for whom we need a detailed revised budget, we've asked you for them. And I think we've received most of them now, or they're in process. The state has said that, if there are small changes to budgets, that's fine. They don't need to be resubmitted. So we don't need all 90 of you to send us new budgets. Most entities who applied received fewer dollars than they asked for. So there's some play there, and we're asking you guys to go in and decide how best to edit those budgets so that you can still do the work you need to do. So if we asked you for a new budget, we need a new budget from you. We reached out to a few organizations to do that. If we didn't, you guys want to go back through your budget and update to reflect the funding amount so that you've got a good documentation for if you get questions down the road. But that's pretty much where we are on that. Susie, do you want to say anything else about that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
Will you forward a contact list for the members of the team that were introduced today? Or do you want to go through that?
No, we want everything to come through that email. And I mean, there are a couple of reasons for it. The first reason is that we have to be able to document all of our communications with you for federal compliance. So we have to, every time we get an email from you, turn it into a PDF and download it and save it to a file. So that when we get questions from the federal government about how we fielded questions, we have a paper trail. If you text me because you've known me for 20 years, I'm always happy to hear from you, but I'm going to respond to you by saying, please go to this email and start the communications process. I apologize for doing that. I would prefer to talk to many of you by text or phone. That's not an option here. So no, sorry.
For payroll, do we need to have timesheets for salaried employees?
So I'm going to fall back on my federal funding answer that I typically give in these situations because it's unclear to me. Susie, is it clear to you, Susie?
No, they haven't been clear, and I am hoping that they really nail down and clarify that in the new terms and conditions or in the FAQs that they're going to publish, because I think most of us are going to need a really cler answer on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm an optimist. I hope they're going to do that too. I'm also a realist. I'm not sure they're going to do that, but because they've got so many pieces in motion here. When I talk about federal funding with people, I typically say more documentation is better than less, right? So is it possible for you to go back and recreate timesheets for people from March 1st forward who don't keep timesheets? That's probably going to be tricky to do. But at the end of the day, because there are federal funds that are also running through state government, you're open to both federal and state audits. I would suggest to you that the more documentation you have on every expense, the better. And I would also suggest to you that you keep it in such a way, I don't know how many of you are involved in your organizational audits, but you keep it in such a way, like in a file, that you can find all of those things as they relate to each expense. So, tag each item that you're saving, each documentation piece that you're saving under a specific RFF and keep that documentation lined up. So more documentation is better than less, because if somebody comes to you or your successor 5 years from now and has to tell the federal government how the money was spent properly, more information is going to help them better than less information.
Okay, we have a couple of questions about the Tennessee supplier ID. Jesse, maybe we could send in the follow-up email, like a screenshot of what the approved portal submission for the TIN number looks like. I don't know that, we don't have that right this second, I would imagine. But so we'll follow up on that one. And then what's the turnaround time for getting the supplier ID lately?
I think the system has been to some extent overwhelmed. Ours is not the only stream of funding where people are having to do this. So that, you know, they're providing funding to all kinds of different areas. So not just nonprofits, obviously. So it seems to be that if you're applying for the supplier ID and things are simple and easy, like your name has always been the same, you know, all those little ticky things are easy, that the turnaround's pretty quick. Excuse me. If not, if you're running into problems, it's taking longer. So it depends on your individual situation. And she did send some guidance late last night that I'm going to put in the follow-up email that asks for screenshots of particular problems, that kind of thing. So that'll be in a follow-up email. If you've been having supplier ID problems, you are not alone. And look for more information in the follow-up email about how the state wants you to let them know about the problems you're having.
Great. So this person's asking, is there, I think, a template, right, for their primary program is COVID really has been rent and utility assistance. So I guess the question is, which template would they use, John, or is there one being developed for that specifically?
For the equipment, there's a specific template for it.
What about rent and utility assistance, though?
So for rent, that would go under the contracts. Well, let me take that back. For rent and utility assistance, I would say that we're probably going to use that materials template because it's asking for an invoice. And so I think that we can just use that template to, you know, just show where you submitted payment, and, you know, if you've got an invoice or something that you can attach with it. I think that would be the best case scenario.
And really our job is when you send these things into us and you submit them to make sure they get to the right place. So if you submit something and it's not in the right place, we're going to send it back to you and say, no, we need this to go through materials. But you know, I think those templates are similar enough that if it has to go through a different avenue, it can, that information can still be used in the different avenue. So, but the templates, I just saw a chat question too. The templates have not been sent to you yet. We just tested them this week. They seem like they're going to work. We're going to follow up with the follow-up email where we talk about supplier IDs and some of the other information we've gotten. We're going to attach those templates so you all have them.
Great. Okay, Byron has a very specific question about section headings in the document that we're probably going to have to circle back around with him on. So Jesse, will you make a note for us to dig into that? Can we prepay salaried staff through December 30th since expenses through 12/30 are covered, but reimbursement requests have to be submitted by 11/15?
Funny you should ask. We've just been talking about that this morning. Susie, we think the answer is yes. That's probably the right thing to do. Note, everybody note this. The end date is 12/30, not 12/31. We don't know why. Don't ask for money for payroll in advance for the 31st of the year, which is New Year's Eve, when we hopefully will all be done with this and on vacation anyway. But yes, we think the right thing to do, because there is that period behind November 15th, is to prepay those payroll expenses. Right, Susie?
Right
Okay.
now, yes, that is the answer. And we're hoping that is another one of the questions that's been submitted to the state. So make sure that you're always, every time that they have, that Horn or the state has a webinar that you're invited to, please make sure that you attend and constantly be looking at, once they update the terms and conditions and then start posting their FAQs on their website, make sure that you're constantly looking at that.
Yeah, an experience from phase one, when they update FAQs, it's not very clear necessarily like what got edited. It's certainly not redlined. So you're going to have to just stay on top of it and notice the date up top of like last updated by that date. And if it's more recent, you should read them. It's kind of confusing. Okay, so if we have a supplier ID and have registered with SAM.gov, is there something else we need to do on Edison? I'm a little confused on where Edison fits in.
Okay, my understanding is that Edison and the supplier portal are the same thing. So if you have those two things and you've sent them to us through email, we have uploaded them to the state, and the state will do whatever matching is now necessary in order for you to be able to submit for reimbursements. We don't know when they will turn on the system to be able to submit for reimbursements. They said they wouldn't do it until everybody had a supplier ID number. I don't know when that will be because it's all across the state. I am hopeful that that happens soon, as we would like to get to work getting you money. But we don't know. But if the Edison portal and the supplier thing are the same thing, if you have those two numbers, if you have those two pieces done, and we have your tax ID number and your DUNS number, that should be good.
Okay, so related, someone on here has received funding from the state through THDA. Do they have, and they have a supplier ID number, also registered with SAMS. Do they need to call to re-verify anything, or is it all in the system?
It should all be in the system. As I said, I'm uploading it each night, and as they run into problems, they're sending them back to us, and Jesse is reaching out to folks to say, there's a problem, this didn't work, we don't have this number, that kind of thing.
Okay. Are contract staff paid via stipend allowed?
I would refer you to the terms and conditions. I don't see why they wouldn't be, but there might be a term or condition that excludes what you're talking about. Susie, what do you think?
I would say the exact same thing. Like, it seems logical that they would be allowable, but definitely double check those terms and conditions, because sometimes odd things like that do just pop in as disallowed. And make sure that you recheck them once they reissue those terms and conditions. Like, you need to read them now, right? But then who knows what they're going to say when they're reissued. So, and please know that we are going through the same frustrations as you guys, that things are changing as we go and everything else. But we're going to help you guys as much as we can.
I kind of try to think of it as a game. Like, can I put the pieces of the puzzle together before the pieces of the puzzle change for the next step? So try to think of it as a game.
Along
Sorry.
those lines, can we drop in the chat the most recent terms and conditions? Is there a link, or was that an attachment?
We cannot, because they are not posted anywhere. They've been attached to at least 3 emails our recipients have received. They're not posted anywhere online that I can find. I actually went looking, hoping I could just send everybody the link to it. We don't have it. We can't find it. We don't think it's there.
Okay, so it's in an email.
Several emails, and actually, it will. Jesse, will you making it to reattach it with the templates today, so that everybody has the terms and conditions and they have the templates all in one place.
Is the file named with some naming convention so people know, like, as of what date for updating and versioning?
The cover, I think, has a date on it. Hang on, let me look real quick.
I just know that was such a headache, the first phase of this, of knowing.
Which one was most recent? Yeah. Nope. There's no date on it that I see. But I do think that when they reissue them, they'll either put a date on them, or we'll email you and say, replace what you have with this.
So far we've had one version.
One version.
Okay. I think that would answer Deb's question. There's one version currently. There will be an updated one coming.
Yeah, and let me just throw this out for the audience that I think would save them some time. There are pages in the terms and conditions that are white, so it looks like you've gotten to the end, but you haven't. So keep scrolling, and that happens a few times. They must have been scanned. So when you think you've gotten to the bottom, keep scrolling to make sure you're all the way down to the bottom.
Okay. Another stipend question. We're providing workforce training. Are stipends for childcare and travel expenses allowed?
Again, I would refer you to the terms and conditions. Stipends for travel and childcare. Okay, thing number one is it has to be COVID related. So if those things are COVID related, I can't think of off the top of my head an exclusion that I saw in the terms and conditions. But again, I would refer you to those terms and conditions. Susie, you want to jump on?
I would agree, and just say, like, you've got to connect the dots all the way through to how specifically, not just the workforce training itself was COVID related, but why providing childcare and travel expenses for those attendees was specifically COVID related. Yeah, so just be prepared to just really, really document.
And I think that will be primarily in that narrative piece that's listed on the template.
Yeah, I would agree. Are rent payments to CHA properties, including Section 8, allowed?
So I'm going to let Janet take that one.
We last night, as we had our phone call with the state, they have had a change of heart. As you may know, we have been talking not just about the Section 8, but also payments to publicly owned utilities such as EPB. They originally said that we could not use any of the reimbursements that would ultimately go to a government-owned entity. They have now backtracked on that.
Good.
And are saying now that those payments, as long as they are COVID related, are fine. We are expecting to get a write-up on that this afternoon at some point from them. And I'm sure that will be in the information that we will pass along to you as well, confirming that. But that's where we stand as of today.
Yeah, and I will say that it may not be this afternoon by the time we get that. I'm finding that I will say these people at the state are as responsive as they possibly can be. And they're getting questions from all over the state, from hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people. And so I'm like, last night we got a thing from them at 1 a.m. Like their Nashville time, so it was only midnight, but still. They're working hard to get answers to these questions, and they've got a compliance partner they work with, who I imagine is a room of lawyers somewhere who are going through it to get the right answers out. So I think patience is what's required as they work through this, the same way kind of we're working through all this. You know, these fast processes are tough when you're working with an entire state government and the federal government behind you. So it may be today, to Janet's point, but it may be Monday. So just be on the lookout. Those of you who are going to be doing payments for things where the money goes back to a governmental entity like EPB or housing stuff, be on the lookout for that language so you can work through it with your leadership.
Great. Okay, question about prior approval for terms and conditions says we need prior approval from the state before purchasing equipment. Is there an updated process for this?
I don't know of one. Had Janet, Susie, John, have they all seen anything like that? So what I would say there, everybody's shaking their heads no. What I would say there is send us a couple of sentences by email to Jesse, and we'll put those into the batch of questions we send to the state at the end of each day, and we'll ask them for how they want us to do that. Because I noticed that too, that there were some things that required pre-approval, but there was no more information about how to do that. So I imagine that we will email the state, get responses back, and then forward them back onto recipients.
So Jesse, you'll just capture that FAQ from the chat. Okay, great. Or that question, I should say. The templates have not been sent to you yet. We were just screen sharing. We've tested them out, but they'll be coming to you after this. We'll be purchasing a vehicle. What type of prior approval is needed? Okay, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. On the edge of your seat for the next update.
Oh, yeah. High drama theater, right? I read somewhere that payments to public, okay, we just discussed that. Payments to public utilities, this change of heart. If our submitted budget included equipment, Chromebooks, tablets, etc., do we still need approval? I think the approval process we're very unclear on. We're going to have to get more clarity on.
We're going to have to get more clarity on that.
The whole state prior approval piece. Oh, this is fun, Larry. I'm so glad you think so.
We love you, Larry.
Larry's my people.
Positivity, we love it. Concerning providing a stipend payment, when one refers back to the terms and conditions, one is directed to refer to section, which appears to be absent. Okay, yeah, that's the section above. We're going to figure that out about missing section C. How often, this is a great question, how often can reimbursement requests be submitted? Daily, weekly, monthly? Minimum requirement?
So yes, is the answer. But here's what I want to say about that. So we have two financial analysts who are brilliant, hardworking people, and they will do this work as quickly as they can. We have some guidance from the state on how quickly that, they want us to get things to them, that kind of stuff. I would suggest, like, to batch up your expenses so that they can work through and work with you in a way that's more efficient. Like if you send us every $30 you spend, they're going to have to get back to your file, open it all the way up, refresh their memories about what the application was for, look at your budget, match it up. I would say, batch up your expenses. And one way some of you may want to do that is like your first RFF could be for expenses that you've already incurred back to March 1st, which are allowed through this program. Batch those up and send those in all at once, so they can look at the templates, get those into the state, get everything lined up properly. And then once that's in and it's all organized and we're all sure about it and it goes to the state, then turn your attention to the more forward-looking stuff. I think that's probably going to be a good system. Janet, John, do you guys want to talk about that more?
I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's get started on those March forward ones. Let's knock them out, get some money in the door, and then proceed from there.
Especially those of you that are worried about fronting expenses, go back and take like the payrolls from March 1st forward. Those are typically things that are pretty simple to document with and then with a narrative as well. Get those dollars in the door to give you some cushion, and then let's turn forward. But if you guys could batch them for us, that would be helpful. It will probably speed things up. There will be fewer to run through in dribs and drabs. But I think that's the guidance there. Yeah.
Schools are government entities, so the reimbursements and supply provisions would be approved through the related nonprofit which received the grant award. I don't know that I fully understand that question.
What I do know is that public schools and charter schools are governmental entities. That's the most I've got to offer there. I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm not sure who this was who asked the question, but if you try restating it, we'll give it
or just email it to us. It sounds pretty specific. So maybe email it to us.
Great question from Dawn about receiving prior approval for previously purchased equipment supplies. We will include that in the clarification on prior approvals.
Yeah, Jesse, if you'll add that, that'd be great.
And then Heather, can we get another kind of run through of the 4-point plan? Seems like.
Yes. So this is a high level general guideline for how this is going to work. I'm sorry, my voice is going a little bit. I'm happy to send these 4 points in the email as well, if you guys would like me to. Jesse, will you make a note so I don't forget? Okay, so when submitting the RFF, which is the request for funds through CAMS, you're going to prepare the RFF with the supporting documentation using that template and doing your best to comply with the terms and conditions, all the pages of the terms and conditions. You will send it in and it will be assigned to Jessie automatically through the CAMS system. She will review it and double check that you didn't forget anything that needs to be there. That's step 2. Step 3 is that then she will pass it to one of the financial analysts who will then review it and test it using the state procedures for these kinds of financial transactions. If they have questions or concerns, it may come back to you and then move forward again. That's step 3. Step 4 is once the analyst feels as confident as they can about the RFF, they will pass it to me for approval, and then we will submit it to the state. That's step 4. So it's a relatively simple process, but you may hear from Jessie several times in it if things are missing or if the analysts want more information. But I'll include that in the follow-up email.
Okay, looks like, okay, so I think what this person was asking is the change in heart that the state has had around funding government entities like EPB or Section 8 housing. Does that also apply to schools, public schools?
We have no reason to believe it doesn't.
Yeah, their response was specifically rated, or like we were specifically asking about a couple of examples of things, but their response seemed to indicate that it was related basically to payments to all government entities. So
we have no reason to believe that schools would be any different
yes,
at the moment.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the questions in the chat. Anybody have anything else they need to add? We're also at 10 o'clock, so good timing. Okay, so remind us of next steps, Heather.
Okay, I have a 3-point system at the end here. Okay, a couple of reminders. Most of the questions we received so far have been things that we've either sent to the state, which need a state response, like supplier ID issues, SAMS.gov issues, things we have to get more clarity or guidance on, or things that are answered in the terms and conditions. At the risk of beating this poor horse to death, I'm going to say one more time, you've got to read those terms and conditions and get comfortable with them. We cannot eliminate your risk in taking federal funds, especially because they're reimbursement funds. So read them, get comfortable with them, use your templates, get excited. We're going to learn a lot in this process, and we're all going to be so much smarter at the end of it. Okay. One other question that Leslie wanted me to pose. Would it be helpful? I don't know. There's some kind of polling voting system. I don't know how to use it. Would it be helpful if we did this kind of call once a week on Fridays, or like every other week or every few weeks, so that if anybody had a question, they could just hop on and we could y'all could ask us about things and we could pass stuff to the state if we need to? Okay, overwhelming answer is yes from the chat. Okay. So I will work with my team to find a time that works for everybody, or at least most of us to be on weekly. And we'll try to do this again for a couple weeks and see how that goes. So look out for more information on that. Jesse, will you make a note of that as well? Okay, quick reminder too, if you haven't done the supplier ID stuff and the SAMS.gov stuff, like today is your day to climb that mountain. And I'm confident you can do it. And last, we know this is a complicated process. We know that things are changing, and we hear your frustration on some of it, and we are doing our best to get you what we can, to get answers for you where we can. Y'all be patient with us. We'll be patient with you. We'll all be patient with these lovely folks at the state who are sending emails at 1 a.m. trying to get work done too. We're all working from home. My dog just came up and tried to howl at all of you. So just like, take it a day at a time. We'll get through it, and we'll figure it out together. So that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.